Hi, welcome to Aesthetically Speaking Music, where we explore the rich and diverse music of the African diaspora. Today, we're going to talk about when the music of John Coltrane and Eric Dolphy, two of the most important and influential musicians of the 20th century, was called anti-jazz by critics. Yeah, John Coltrane, anti-jazz. But let's go back for a while and try to understand why they call their music this way and how it all began. So, the anti-jazz label was first used by DownBeat associate editor John Tynan in a 1961 article in which he wrote, "At Hollywood's Renaissance Club recently, I listened to a horrifying demonstration of what appears to be a growing anti-jazz trend, exemplified by these foremost proponents, Coltrane and Dolphy, of what is termed avant-garde music. I heard a good rhythm section go to waste behind the nihilistic exercises of the two horns. Coltrane and Dolphy seem intent on deliberately destroying swing. They seem bent on pursuing an anarchistic course in their music that can but be termed anti-jazz." And then in 1962, finally John Coltrane and Eric Dolphy are invited by DownBeat magazine to give a proper answer to this criticism and also to explain what they were trying to do with their music. So next we're gonna see some quotes from Eric Dolphy and John Coltrane trying to answer to these critics. And of course, this whole article will be available in the description of this video if you want to check it out. At some point in the interview, they were asked what they were trying to do. Eric laughs and says, "That's a good question." And then he goes on, "What I'm trying to do I find enjoyable, inspiring, what it makes me do. It helps me play this feel. It's like you have no idea what you're going to do next. You have an idea, but there's always that spontaneous thing that happens. This feeling, to me, leads the whole group. When John plays, it might lead into something you had no idea it could be done. Or McCoy does something, or the way Alvin Jones or Jimmy Garrison play, they solo, they do something. Or when the rhythm section is sitting on something in a different way. I feel that is what it does for me." And then John completes, "It's more than beauty that I feel in music, that I think musicians feel in music. What we know we feel, we'd like to convey to the listener. We hope that this can be shared by all. I think basically that's about what we're trying to do. We never talked about just what we are trying to do. If you ask me that question, I might say this today and tomorrow say something entirely different, because there are many things to do in music. But overall, I think the main thing a musician would like to do is to give a picture to the listener of the many wonderful things he knows of and senses in the universe. That's what music is to me. It's just another way of saying this is a big, beautiful universe we live in that's being given to us. And here's an example of just how magnificent and encompassing it is. That's what I would like to do. I think that's one of the greatest things you can do in life, and we all try to do it in some way. The musicians is through his music." But it's interesting to look back and think that nowadays John Coltrane is considered one of the biggest jazz icons of all times, and at the time he wouldn't go so far to call his music jazz. Thus, maybe the critics saying that the music of John Coltrane and Eric Dolphy wasn't even jazz was actually giving them a compliment, since they never called their music jazz in the first place. At this point, you might be asking yourself, so what exactly is aesthetically speaking music? And yeah, we have these cool videos with interesting topics about African diasporic music, but beyond all that, we are also a group of discussions that gathers in online sessions to talk about these themes. Our sessions are conducted by one of our great educators, and each one of them has a specific topic. Next, you're gonna see the discussion that our members, who we call seekers, had about the anti-jazz term and about the criticism on Coltrane's and Dolphy's music. If you're interested in finding out more about us and becoming a seeker, check out our website in the description of this video. Also, please subscribe to our channel, click the like button, and let's now see what our seekers have to say about it.
What I want to say is that would anybody like to chime in on the article that was sent out? The article with John Coltrane and Eric Dolphy. And they were asking them, I think John Tyner was the New York critic that was writing about, and you read it, right, Bob?
Leonard Feather.
Yeah,
I read it.
and then Leonard Feather chimed in, and they called them anti-jazz. Anti-jazz. Now these, there was nothing but beauty and love in their music. John Coltrane, a love supreme, a supreme love. So you see what I'm saying? They were all about that.
They didn't have any answers for the music or anything like that.
They didn't know what to make of it.
Because they couldn't understand it.
Swing music from the past.
They were living in the past.
Themselves,
See, you know what, the same thing, when you have innovative, creative artists, you know, which I think, you know, what I tried to do is like pull these innovative, creative artists into this art class discussions because they were alienated for being creative, you know, at first, until they figure out they can make a lot of money off of John Coltrane records and Eric Dolphy and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But they were vilified very early on for what they were trying to do. And this was always, this became a pattern, you know, with Charlie Parker. It became a pattern when Miles Davis decided he was going to do Bitches Brew and On the Corner, when his electric period. You know, this is what artists went through. John Coltrane, what are you trying to do, John Coltrane? Sheets of sound. You know, it's a very, very, very enlightening and incredible article that I hope we get a chance to get in there deep.
The part of the article that I found was really pushing the envelope was them holding the critics to task and asking them to improve the critics process.
Yes, ma'am.
And having the critics process informed by the artist's words about what they were trying to do would make it so much richer. And they were open and very gracious about how they described that as a possible thing.
Just on that note, just on that note, I was trying to find if Leonard Feather or John Tynan replied. And so far, I haven't done a deep search yet, but I haven't seen any kind of obvious replies on their part or rebuttal. It would have been very interesting to see. But it's also interesting to hear their silence. You know, the thing I was looking for in the article was a couple of words like anti-jazz and, you know, all of that. These guys didn't say anything about that. The whole thing was how much they loved it and how much their love for the music. There was nothing anti or nothing, you know, even the word jazz was not even in there at all.
They didn't even say it. Did you notice that?
Thank you. I'm so glad.
You know, you got to be careful about trashing an artist, which then causes the certain parts of the audience, at least, not to even come or not to even listen and form their own opinions. And I think that's really relevant to all music or all art, really.
Exactly.
You know, it's one thing to say, you know, in my opinion, but when you start saying things like this isn't even music and this isn't, you know,
anti-jazz,
you know, anti-jazz, whatever, then it's really not giving the audience a fair shake or the artist a fair shake.
You know, Thelonious Monk cornered one of the critics in New York like that. And he said, you know, when you write things like this hurts my family. It hurts, you know, and interrupts the way that I can make a living, you know, and they were totally oblivious to how hurtful some of the words that they put out there on these great people, you know, and what, you know, the repercussions of that. You know, well, you know, I'm in Chicago and you know, man, you know, you didn't get a good review on your last, so I'm not going to hire you. Or they said you were late, or they said they didn't understand you, or, you know, something, you know, that kind of thing. And it goes right into, Eric Dolphy said, he interjected that the critic should consult the musician when there is something the critic does not fully understand. Does that make sense?
Right. I agree.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
The artist is always ahead.
Always, but you have to talk to the artists and say, what's your philosophy? What are you thinking about? What is this? Tell me, you tell me.
Yeah.
I feel that many times, I feel that what was going on at the time was what I call that new music, inventing music or discovering music that had actually been never heard before by anyone, including the critics. And no one actually knew how to take it, and the critics basically took it upon themselves to be able to instruct us or to the public as to what they were hearing in comparison with what had been heard before. Sometimes they don't understand, what a person's trying to do with their music. Sure. And I shouldn't say sometimes, because with jazz, I think that was what was happening many times. People thought Coltrane's music was grotesque. Up until the time that he made something that was familiar to them, like My Favorite Things and things like things of that nature. People could sort of get into Coltrane and what he was doing after he took My Favorite Things and made such a wonderful piece out of that. But that's been happening throughout the years. So I think that the critics, I'm not down on the critics, but I think it's probably not an enviable job. Period.
Listen, okay. The same thing happened with hip hop music. Okay.
Yeah, everything.
You hear what I'm saying? Yeah. Totally terrible. This is not music. It's not that. It's not. All these things. And it's weird how people can put that kind of spin on the music. Not to say that it's all great, but all the music is not great. It's like an expression of the people, you see. My thought.
And I think the critics should take responsibility. That's what they're not. They're not because they're in a heck of, like you say, they're in a very important position, and it's also like human nature to put those labels on stuff, to put it in a little compartment where they can understand it. You know, they put it over here and label it like that, and that goes back to the whole label of jazz, and they're putting it in that thing.
Yes. There we go. And you see that nobody brought that word up. Nobody said that in that article. Nobody said, well, Eric Dolphy has said something about, we said, what swing? Well, what do you mean swing?
Yeah. Maybe they can sit down and explain their position or that phrase to us or something like that. They appear to be unclear about this here anti-jazz thing. So we want to hear from the perpetrator's mouth. Let's put it that way, because they are perpetrating this thing with the anti-jazz. Because I can see them now looking at each other. What are you talking about? This anti-jazz. But when you're critiquing a piece, and one of the things that when I was kind of learning the craft of writing is that you have to, if you're critiquing something, then you have to know, first of all, you have to know the history of the thing. You have to know this thing is how it has evolved in the present time. And in order to be a successful give a successful critique, because I don't believe in this criticism thing. In order to give a successful critique, you have to make up in your mind where this thing that you're critiquing, what are the potentialities? What are the possibilities? They didn't do that. They didn't do that because they were unfamiliar with the culture.
Right.
That's my position. Okay. You got to be ensconced in the thing that you're at least say, I think it was Nat Hentoff, they say, well, we're in a period before his death. He said, well, we're in a period of discovery. you know, because this is evolving. It's forever evolving.
Yeah,
and we have to
absolutely.
accept that.
Yeah.
You know, if we're going to write about it, if we're going to critique it, you know, then we have to accept the potentiality. We have to accept the possibilities. And there's no way that you can do that without doing, as Dr. Edward Bynum would say, you can't do that unless you have studied the vibrations in this thing we call music.
John Coltrane said, the best thing a critic can do is to thoroughly understand what he is writing about and then jump in. That's all he can do. I have even seen favorable criticism which revealed a lack of profound analysis, causing it to be a little more than superficial.
Well, he wanted to say something else, but he was kind.
That was wonderful though. That was absolutely wonderful.
But that's exactly right. You know, they were very kind and loving people, but they were met with with this tension of the times. And you're talking about 1962. You know what the temperature of the times were in this country and in Europe. And in Europe, which we will get into as we go along.